Since it is the practice of enlightenment, that practice has no beginning, and since it is enlightenment within the practice, that realization has no end. The moment we receive true and trusting, solid and clear like a diamond, infinite light and life embrace and protect us, liberating us completely. Welcome everyone to the Blessing of the Beast. This is the 19th annual version of this ceremony, which is very special to me. I think that a lot of times our animal companions are so important to us, but sometimes we don't really honor them until they've died. And so this, for me, making this a part of our Dragonfly Sangha liturgical cycle is a way to always sort of cherish that sacred bond that we have and lift these creatures up. So where does all of this come from? So as far as the Buddhist tradition is concerned, animals have always been intimately linked with the teachings of the Dharma. I could start with the Jataka tales. The Jataka tales were early stories of the Buddha Shakyamuni's previous incarnation, and his different incarnations included being animals at different times. And so they're told as sort of moral fables, and they probably were the inspiration for the Greek Aesop fables. So they have a very similar feel to that. It's noted that when Shakyamuni passed, on the day of his death, that there were animals who gathered in grieving, and it's said that only the cats did not cry, and the cats just sat in meditation. But it's not just belonging to the Buddhist tradition. If you study spiritual or religious traditions going back to the very earliest records we have of humankind, there were generally ceremonies and rituals, and a lot of this also began not just during the times where we were hunter-gatherers, where there was a great respect for the creature that was so intimately linked with the tribe, but also when we began to live in agricultural settings and in sort of the in-between of that, some 13,000 years ago or so. But they would, because these animals were so intimately linked to their living, the livestock, animal husbandry, etc. Again, it had a very sacred sense that they were depending on the life of these creatures. And of course, then there is the cat and the dog that became domesticated. Some people put it the other way around and say cats domesticated us, not once but twice in human history. But there's an intimate connection. And so, interestingly, like in the Christian tradition, you have all the various different groups, Catholic and Protestant, but a blessing of the beasts or a recognition of our animal companions, that's the one liturgy that transcends all the denominations. So it's kind of cool that this sort of blessing is something that's very ancient and old, and I'm so glad that we continue it. So if we look at this recognition of the bond between humans and animals, I'm going to focus on cats. Now, I've had dogs and I love them dearly and I will mention them, but cats have always been my favorites. And so, when I look at the history of Buddhism, I thought I'd share with you some interesting things regarding cats. So, cats are very popular, particularly in Thailand and Japan. You will find cats at Buddhist temples. They are considered good karma, and sometimes it's considered that they are the reincarnation of previous priests or monks, and now they're living the good life as cats. So there's a constant sense of this, and in particular, I think it's really fun is the story of Gotokuji, which was a temple that supposedly was run by a priest, according to legend and lore, and it was down on its luck. It was starting to fall apart, and people were not attending, and people were not supporting, and so this priest was praying for help, and one day this cat showed up, and it began to, stay with him and befriend him. Well, on another day, a samurai was coming by, and he was not just a samurai. I think he was a lord, a daimyo, and he was coming by, and he went by this temple, which I say was in disuse, and he sees this cat, and according to legend, the cat waves at him, and so he thought that was peculiar. So he follows the cat, and just as the cat leads him into this old temple, a storm, a terrible storm occurs. And this samurai believes that this cat saved him from that storm. And so, because he was grateful, he also had wealth. He used his money to restore that temple. So that temple was called Gotokuji. And if you've ever seen in restaurants, you've seen the Japanese restaurant, you see the cat sort of, doing this sort of this waving, and that cat is known as Mango Nico, and so that's what that represents, and that's why it's always been associated with good karma. There's another temple that's really cool that is known as Nyan Nyanji, which literally would translate to Meow Meow Temple. And it's known for taking cats in. It's known as a refuge, but also it's pretty much understood the cats run the temple. So there is a very deep relationship. Cats, for me, are symbols of grace, independence, and mystery. It's the very things I admire about them that I try to see in myself. So I'm going to talk about the animals that have been my companions and what they've taught me. So my first cat, when I was a very little boy, living in Holliesburg, Pennsylvania, was Susie. And Susie would often get up on my bed in the morning and at night, and she would do the kneading. But sometimes her nails were long, and it would hurt, you know. And at first it bothered me, but over time I began to look forward to it because it was something that was familiar. And what that taught me was that her claws were not a detriment. And it's sort of like our ego self. It's not a detriment to us. It's just who we are. Sometimes it hurts, but it's a part of who we are uniquely in this life. That's what Susie taught me. TJ taught me about loyalty. When I had TJ, it was when I was in my late teens, and I'd be out running around on adventures all night. And every night, though, I could depend on TJ laying there in my bed and waiting for me and always welcoming me. And it was just a nice ritual that I had. So TJ taught me that. He was always there. Even if I didn't, honestly see him much during the day, he made a point of being there when I was coming to bed. Trevor was a dog, was a black Labrador retriever, and Trevor was wild. Trevor was one of those dogs that could not be trained. He was taken to a training camp. He failed. And so you had to learn to accept him as the wild beast that he was. But I did love him dearly. And he taught me patience and also how I may fail at times. But conditionless love transcends our ignorance. He was just one of those creatures that you just had to accept that if he got off the leash, he would run. And he would run into the woods, and he would go and go. And I would chase him into the night trying to find him, and sometimes he wouldn't come back till morning. But he taught me patience. He taught me that if you love someone or a creature, that, you have to kind of let them be themselves. You can't always control them. And then there was Jackie. Jackie taught me that what I think is appropriate may not be for another, and to understand the uniqueness of others. The thing about Jackie was she was a Siberian Husky, beautiful dog. And this dog, in these very cold, harsh winters that we would have in Western Pennsylvania, um, I would, she would beg to get out at the door, and it would be a snowstorm with feet of snow and very cold. But for her, she loved it. And so I would take her out there and I'd check on her every now and then, but she'd just be out there in that cold and she loved it. So it taught me that, what I think is appropriate is not always what's appropriate for others. Tao taught me how important it is to have compassion for the hurt child within, to care for the ego self and gently guide it. Tao was a big baby. Tao was one of those creatures that he never seemed to move out of this baby state. He would constantly drool on you. He'd constantly be on you. He was constantly with you, and he always wanted to be held. And I think that sometimes that's how our ego self is. If we don't give it attention, it's going to constantly be seeking it. And even when it does, if we care for it, it can help it to move out of that type of space. And then there was Keto. Keto taught me how wildness, similar to the way Trevor was, is just a part of us that must be honored when we get too restrictive in our lives. Keto is a creature that I found when we were doing a retreat. I believe it was Hanamatsuri, and her mother and her brothers and sisters were all adopted by one of us, and so we were able to take each one home. And Keto was one, and she crawled up on my foot and kind of chose me. But she never lost some of that feralness that she had. She always kind of had to be out at night. And my fondest memory would, I used to worry about her, but I mean, I would always, before I would go to bed, open the front door, go outside, call her, and sometimes she would be coming from so far away. But as soon as she got in, man, she wouldn't stop talking. And she just wanted to tell me about her adventures that night. And finally, there's Basil, Sir Basil. He's taught me how important it is to cultivate calmness and cool and to show love to all. Basil is the archetype cat of the Zen cat. He is so chill. We take him everywhere. We take him on planes, trains, automobiles, and he always does so well. He's always beloved by everyone we come across, and it's just wonderful. And he is just so chill. I often call him the Bodhisattva cat because I've never seen him kill anything. I've seen him capture creatures and then let them go. And so I've never seen a cat do that before. Keto, she was the mighty warrior. She would take and kill a creature and leave it in front of the Kanzeon statue on our front porch as a sharing. But Basil, no. And the other thing that I love about Basil is that he will spend time with each of us in the home. He makes sure that he'll spend time. If my son's home, he'll make sure that he goes up and spends time with him. He'll go spend time with my wife wherever she is, and then he comes and spends time with me. So it's almost, he knows that it's important for him to share that love. And so that's the way that my animal companions have been. The last thing I want to talk about is a new book that I've written. And this book is called The Keeper and the Watcher. And it's basically the story of a shaman from, I don't know, somewhere around 30,000 years ago, something like that, who basically learns how to be a good shaman to the tribe from his beloved cat that we call the Watcher. So I will put a link to that new book in below the video, but I hope you will enjoy it. I wrote it for my future grandchildren and dedicated it to my cat companions. But it's just a short little illustrated book But I hope that people will like it. There's a page at the end of the book where you can draw your own picture or color your own picture. So I thought that would be a nice touch. So, you know, the, the, the place of these creatures in our lives is just, you know, to me, it's somewhat immeasurable. I'm not sure that I quite go to the distance that Mark Twain did when he said, I prefer people, I prefer cats over people. But I love them and I honor them as I know you do too. So I'm going to close this part of the liturgy with the blessing. In the name of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we give you thanks in the name of holy oneness for the animals who live with us. Let us be ever grateful for the companionship they provide and help us to be faithful in caring for them. We pray today for all animals, especially those that are mistreated, and that this will come to an end. We remember with love our companion animals who have died. We remember at this time also those animals who are lost or separated from their companions. We offer a special blessing on every creature lifted up here today, the large and the small. May they live peacefully. Bless us to love all of creation and revere the sacredness. We ask this blessing in the name of holy oneness, within whom all creatures belong, and whom none are ever truly separated from us. Namo Jizo Bosa. Namo Jizo Bosa. Namo Jizo Bosa.